Hello, Taurus. Welcome in, and thank you for being here with me today. Before we get into this reading, just take a gentle breath, settle into your space, and allow yourself to listen without forcing anything to fit. Take what resonates and leave the rest. Okay, Taurus, there is a very specific feminine energy showing up almost immediately, and I feel like you're being asked to notice her rather than make any quick judgment about her. The Queen of Wands is sitting right here at the center of this energy, and there's something about this woman that feels difficult to ignore. She may be confident, she may have a strong personality, or perhaps she's simply someone whose presence tends to affect the atmosphere around her. When she enters a room, people notice. When she has an opinion, people tend to hear it. And for some of you, I keep getting the letter L around this person. That could be the beginning of a first name, a last name, a nickname, maybe even a place or something connected to her. Please don't force that detail if it doesn't resonate, but it feels specific enough that I want to mention it. What's interesting is that I don't immediately feel like the cards are asking you to decide whether this woman is good or bad. That's not where this is going yet. It feels more like there's something you haven't completely seen about her, something subtle. And Taurus, you may already know what I'm talking about, because I feel like you've noticed a small shift recently. Maybe it was something she said. Maybe it was the way she responded when you shared good news. Perhaps there was a conversation where her words sounded perfectly normal, but something underneath them didn't feel quite the same. And look at this. The Queen of Cups comes through beside the Queen of Wands. Yeah. This makes the energy more complicated, because I feel like emotion is involved here. There could be genuine care between you and this person. This may be somebody you've trusted, somebody you've supported, or someone who knows enough about your personal life that you wouldn't automatically think you needed to keep your guard up around them. For others, the Queen of Cups may actually be describing you in this situation. You've tried to approach this person with patience. You've tried to understand rather than accuse. But then I have the Page of Swords. Okay, this is where I start paying closer attention. There's a lot of watching around this situation. Information seems to be moving from one person to another. Somebody may be asking questions, checking something, noticing what you're doing, or perhaps hearing pieces of a story through other people. I don't necessarily feel like you know the full extent of these conversations yet. And I really don't want you becoming paranoid about everyone around you, because that's not what this reading is asking you to do. It feels much quieter than that. You may simply need to become a little more observant, because the High Priestess is coming out next, and Taurus, this card changes the feeling of the table for me. I keep sensing that your intuition may have picked something up before your conscious mind was ready to acknowledge it. You know those moments when someone says something and you move on with your day, but later that sentence comes back into your mind, or you notice somebody's expression for half a second and wonder why it stayed with you. That's the kind of feeling I'm getting. Perhaps you've been telling yourself, I'm probably reading too much into this. And maybe you are. That's always possible. But the High Priestess doesn't feel like she's asking you to confront anyone. She feels like she's asking you to remain quiet enough to notice what reveals itself naturally. Oh my God, and I'm noticing how the Page of Swords is sitting between these feminine energies. That feels important. There could be another person involved in how information is traveling. Something may have been repeated differently than it was originally said. Someone could also be watching this woman just as closely as you're beginning to. And that's where this becomes interesting, Taurus, because I don't feel like you're the only person noticing something. There may be somebody around this situation who knows a little more than you do. Perhaps they've seen something you haven't seen yet. Perhaps they've heard a conversation you weren't present for. Or maybe they've been trying to decide whether they should tell you something because they don't know how you'll receive it. For the moment, I wouldn't rush toward confrontation. I wouldn't make assumptions about this woman either. Just pay attention to what happens around her, what gets said, what suddenly changes, and especially what your body quietly tells you when something doesn't quite add up. Because I keep feeling that someone is getting closer to saying something to you. And whatever they're trying to tell you may change the way you've been looking at this entire situation. The devil coming onto the table makes me want to slow this down a little, because there is an attachment here that could make it difficult to separate what you feel from what you actually know. It may be emotional. It may involve money, loyalty, attraction, history, or simply the amount of time you've invested in someone. And I feel like that's important, Taurus, because when you've given something your time, your trust, your energy, you don't necessarily want somebody walking in and telling you that you've been looking at it the wrong way. There may be a conversation coming toward you that feels uncomfortable for exactly that reason. Someone could mention this woman with the letter L, or perhaps they bring up something she said, something she did, or something they've noticed. But please be careful here, because I don't feel like the cards are saying, believe this person immediately. They're asking you to listen without surrendering your own judgment. The Eight of Swords is sitting beside the devil, and I feel like information could become overwhelming very quickly if you allow yourself to spiral. You may hear one thing and suddenly start revisiting 10 old conversations. You remember that strange comment from months ago. You remember the time she didn't respond the way you expected. You remember something somebody else told you. Before you know it, you're building an entire story in your mind without knowing which pieces actually belong together. Yeah, don't do that to yourself. There is something worth noticing, but fear doesn't have to be the one interpreting it, and here's the Seven of Swords. Okay, this is where I would become more discerning, because something feels incomplete. I don't necessarily mean that somebody is deliberately lying to you. Perhaps information has been left out. Perhaps somebody only knows one side of what happened. Maybe a conversation was repeated without context. There could even be a person who genuinely believes they're protecting you while still giving you a version of events shaped by their own feelings. That's why gossip feels so important around this energy. One person says something, another person adds something, and eventually nobody remembers where the original story began. Taurus, you don't need to participate in that. You don't need to defend yourself, defend L, accuse L, or choose sides, simply because somebody wants an immediate reaction from you. The Queen of Cups comes through again, and I love that she's here, because she softens this whole situation. I feel like she's asking you to stay emotionally grounded. You can hear something disturbing without allowing it to control you. You can acknowledge a red flag without immediately deciding what it means. You can even love or care about someone while quietly recognizing that there may be parts of them you haven't fully understood. For some of you, this woman may be someone you've known for a long time, and that's exactly why the warning feels complicated. There may be affection here. There may be history. Perhaps you've defended her before. Perhaps she's been there during an important period of your life, or this could be someone connected to work, family, friendship, or even a romantic situation where interests overlap in ways that aren't immediately obvious. The devil makes me wonder whether there is something tying multiple people together beneath the surface. Money could be involved for some of you. Status, attention, attraction, jealousy, competition, or even an old emotional attachment could be influencing what people are saying. But again, I don't want to turn this woman into the villain of the story, because I don't think we have enough yet. Actually, I'm becoming curious about the person bringing the warning, because the Seven of Swords isn't sitting here alone. The Eight of Swords tells me there may be confusion surrounding the message itself, while the Queen of Cups asks you to feel beneath the words. So when somebody comes to you with information, pay attention not only to what they're telling you, but how they're telling you. Do they seem genuinely concerned? Are they asking you to think for yourself, or pushing you toward a conclusion? Do they want to protect you, or do they need you to believe something? Taurus? That distinction could become very important. I keep sensing that one detail hasn't surfaced yet, and when it does, it may change the position of everyone involved. There is still something missing from this story, something sitting between what you've been told and what actually happened. And the cards coming forward feel like they're getting very close to revealing exactly where that missing piece has been hiding. The High Priestess feels almost unusually quiet here, and that silence is telling me more than a dramatic card probably could. I feel like something may reveal itself without you having to chase it, Taurus. You may not need to question anyone or search for proof. It could simply be one moment, one message, one conversation that happens in front of you, and suddenly, something you've been sensing begins to make a little more sense. The moon comes through beside her, and this is where the situation feels layered. There may be emotions influencing what people remember, what they say, and even what they believe happened. Someone could be speaking from hurt. Someone else could be speaking from jealousy or fear. And perhaps somebody isn't intentionally hiding anything at all. They may simply be seeing the situation through their own emotional lens. That's why I keep feeling that you need to leave room for the story to change as more information comes in. You may receive a message that seems ordinary at first. Maybe somebody casually mentions L in conversation. Perhaps you see a name appear somewhere you weren't expecting it. You could hear two people discussing something and suddenly realize that one detail doesn't match what you were previously told. It doesn't have to be dramatic. In fact, I feel like the smaller the detail is, the more important it could become. Oh my God. The Four of Cups. This feels like something that has already been close to you, but you haven't recognized its importance yet. Maybe you've been looking for a huge confession when the truth is sitting inside a small inconsistency. You've been waiting for somebody to tell you exactly what happened when perhaps their behavior has already been telling you something. Or you may have been so focused on L that you haven't really examined the motives of the other people involved. And that last possibility feels especially strong. Because what if the question isn't simply, can I trust her? What if the deeper question is, why does this person need me to distrust her? That doesn't automatically make the warning false. Please remember that. Someone may genuinely be trying to protect you, and what they're telling you could turn out to be important. But the High Priestess with the moon makes me feel like you aren't supposed to accept the first interpretation you're given. There is another layer here. The Ace of Swords comes down, and, yeah, this is different. The energy becomes cleaner. Something may be said directly. A piece of information could become verifiable. You might finally have a conversation where somebody stops speaking in hints and tells you exactly what they know. Or perhaps you see something for yourself, which means you no longer have to depend on somebody else's version of events. For some Taurus, this could even involve L speaking for herself. Maybe she explains something you didn't know. Maybe her explanation confirms the warning. Maybe it completely changes it. I feel like there could be a moment when you look at this woman and realize that the version of her you've been hearing about doesn't perfectly match the person standing in front of you. And for others, the opposite may happen. Something she says could confirm that your intuition wasn't imagining the distance, the strange behavior, or the tension you've been picking up. Either way, clarity feels more important than blame. The Ace of Swords doesn't make me want to create a villain. It makes me want to remove the fog. And Taurus, once that fog starts clearing, I feel like you may notice something surprising about the person who originally brought this information toward you. Their reaction to your clarity could tell you almost as much as the warning itself. If they genuinely care about you, perhaps they'll respect your need to think. But if they become angry because you won't immediately take their side, if they pressure you, exaggerate, or keep adding new details every time you question the story, that may become information too. Okay, this is getting very specific. I keep sensing that you are approaching a choice, but it isn't simply a choice between believing L or believing somebody else. It feels more like you're being asked to decide who gets access to your trust, your attention, and your energy after you finally see the dynamics underneath all of this. And there's another card beginning to push forward here, with a completely different energy, almost as though the moment you understand what's happening, the question stops being about them and becomes about what you're going to do with what you know. The Magician feels like a complete shift in your position within this story. I don't feel like you're sitting there waiting for somebody else to tell you what to believe anymore. There's a quiet confidence coming through, Taurus, almost like you've realized you don't actually need every person involved to agree with your interpretation. You just need enough clarity to decide what feels healthy for you, what doesn't, and where your boundaries need to be. And I really like this energy for you because the Magician isn't making me feel reactive. You're not rushing into a confrontation. You're not trying to expose anybody or prove somebody wrong. It feels much more intentional than that. Perhaps you ask one direct question. Perhaps you quietly stop sharing certain personal information. Maybe you create some distance and simply watch what happens when people no longer have the same access to you. Sometimes that tells you everything. The Queen of Wands appears again, and seeing her return feels significant. This woman connected to the letter L may look very different to you once you've had the opportunity to observe the situation for yourself. For some of you, yes, you may recognize behavior that makes you uncomfortable. Perhaps there's competition underneath the friendship, jealousy underneath the support, or an interest you weren't aware of before. If that's what becomes clear, you don't have to create a dramatic ending. You can simply adjust the relationship. But for another group of Taurus, I feel like something almost opposite could happen. You may realize that this woman wasn't exactly who somebody described her to be. Maybe she made mistakes. Maybe she's complicated. Maybe there are things you don't particularly like about how she handled something. But that doesn't necessarily mean every warning you've received about her was accurate. And that distinction matters, because the Chariot comes through. And this feels like the moment where you stop allowing other people's emotions to steer your decisions. I keep sensing that there may have been too many voices around this situation. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody thinks they know what happened. Everybody wants you to understand their side. But Taurus, you're allowed to choose peace over participation. You're allowed to say, "I heard you," without saying, "I believe everything you told me." You're allowed to care about someone and still create boundaries. You're allowed to discover that you misunderstood somebody and change your mind. And you're absolutely allowed to walk away from a dynamic that keeps pulling you into confusion. Okay, 6 of Wands. This feels like dignity returning to the situation. Not victory over another person. Not somebody losing so that you can win. It's more like you come through this understanding yourself better. You become more selective about whose opinions enter your private world. You recognize that your intuition works best when it isn't being drowned out by fear, pressure, or gossip. I feel like that's one of the deeper messages here. The warning may matter, but what you do with it matters more. Perhaps someone really was trying to protect you. If so, time and consistency may help you recognize that. Perhaps somebody was projecting their own feelings onto you. That may become obvious too. And perhaps Elle herself has something to say that changes the entire picture. You don't have to decide before you have enough information. The Magician, the Chariot, and 6 of Wands together make me feel like you're leaving this situation with your hands back on the wheel. You're choosing who gets access to you. You're choosing which conversations deserve your attention. You're choosing whether something needs confrontation, distance, forgiveness, or simply silence. And I keep coming back to that Queen of Wands because she entered this reading so strongly, but she doesn't get to define how this story ends. Neither does the person warning you. You do. So Taurus, protect your peace without closing your heart. Listen carefully without becoming afraid. Let people's actions speak alongside their words, and give yourself permission to change your perspective when new information appears. Whatever this letter L means for you, don't force it. If it resonates, you'll likely understand why. If it doesn't, simply leave that piece here. Thank you for spending this time with me and allowing me to read these energies with you. Take gentle care of yourself, trust your own pace, and I hope you carry a little more clarity and peace with you after this reading. Until we meet again, Taurus, be well, and I'll see you soon.